about early voting, and it's a topic that's extremely important because these numbers are the first real set in stone numbers away from the polls, away from the pundits, away from the forecasters. These are actual numbers about how the race is currently going. Of course, you can vote on election day or by mail, by absentee ballot, or of course, you can vote early. So voting early means showing up to a polling place to vote early, or it also includes the mail in ballots that have already been returned. So, of course, they don't count and release how, the votes are breaking down by candidate, but we do know the party registration of the ballots that are, that have been cast early, that have been returned in the mail, or that have been cast at an early voting location. So, for example, you could see in Pennsylvania that a total of 285,072 Democratic registered ballots have been returned or whatever submitted ballots cast compared to the Republicans. Really abysmal compared to the Democratic number 95,666. So that is, of course, quite a disparity between the Democrats and Republicans. And, it's part of what you'd expect, right? The Republicans, of course, Donald Trump, kind of justified his 2020 election loss by saying that the mail in ballots and the absentee ballots, all of that was rigged. And even before the election, he discouraged his own supporters from voting by mail. It was sort of a way, it appears to me, to cope with his election loss. Now, that's just whatever. That's about him, how he reacts to losing an election. But this is more important than that. And of course, the Republicans, as you can see in this headline, Trump is now changing this strategy, of course, because he wants to win the election. But this is a new ball game because now we are in a new election. That was, of course, from the 2020 election, and it matters that Republicans have to vote early if Trump wants a chance at winning this election. It requires people by voting early or by mail, by absentee ballot. That's just a fact. A major reason he lost in 2020 was because he discouraged voting by mail so much. And then, these older Republican voters who didn't trust that their ballot would be counted properly due to whatever fraud. And they didn't want to turn out on election day because of the COVID pandemic, that really depressed Republican turnout in the election. It could have possibly cost him the election. So to see a disparity in numbers like this is what Republicans have been trying to avoid this entire campaign. They have been running a pro-voting early campaign, and they are failing clearly because this is Democrats outpacing Republicans by about 300%, according to this guy. When you do the math, Democrats doing 300% better in terms of early votes than Republicans. In 2020, now this is insane. In 2020, when the Trump campaign was pushing this anti mail in ballot, anti voting early campaign, they were doing better in mail in ballots. Republicans are doing worse now in 2024, despite their pro early voting campaign that they've been running for months and months and months now. They've completely reversed their role on that. Despite that, they are doing worse than in 2020 when they ran an entire anti mail in ballot campaign. As you can see, in 2020, at this time, the Democrats outpaced Republicans by 273%. So, yes, it's close, and yes, it's not like this is going to produce a landslide for Democrats, but the fact of the matter is, Kamala Harris is doing better than Joe Biden right now in terms of not necessarily the raw number of mail in ballots, which we're about to get to, but when it comes to the ratio, the proportion of Democrats to Republicans, Kamala Harris is doing better than Joe Biden in 2020. This is Pennsylvania, I'll mind you. And Joe Biden literally won the election in 2020, as well as Pennsylvania. So as of now, Kamala Harris is outpacing Joe Biden's 2020 election result. Now, whoops, wrong tab. And it goes further than that. As you can see, a very similar situation. Now, it's not as a disparity, almost though. In Michigan, early votes, it's a lot closer, 305,874 to the GOP is 185,493, outpacing almost what would this be? 200%. Because 200%, because 100% would be matching it. So Democrats are almost outpacing Republicans by 200% there. And then more than 200% actually in Wisconsin. It's 90,000, of course, a much lower population in Wisconsin than Michigan and Pennsylvania. But Democrats have submitted 90,570 early votes, Republicans 41,900. So it's a very interesting ball game when it comes to early votes again, because these numbers are set in stone and it really guides us about how this election is going. Of course, these were critical early votes in predicting the 2020 election because, during COVID, early votes would have been or were such a significant portion of the votes, much more prominent block of votes than in previous elections because of the situation that America was in with the pandemic. Americans didn't want to, whatever, go out to the polls, risk getting sick and all that. So that was extremely important, early voting data in predicting the 2020 election. And it did, in fact, in 2020, as you can see here, the 273% margin, it did point towards a Joe Biden victory in November. And again, it's not like Democrats are going to win 300% more votes than Republicans nationwide. Um, of course, because mail-in votes always favor Democrats, and that's why whatever election results change throughout the night. Trump could have a lead, as in Pennsylvania, and then Biden took the lead some days later. That's because they count the election day ballots first, and then they start counting the mail-in ballots. At least that's how it was in 2020. I don't know about 2024 if they have changed that system. Um, so of course this voter block, these early voters, these absentee, these mail-in voters are going to favor Democrats just because of, the past remarks Trump has made. But clearly this campaign that Trump has been running to his supporters, trying to get them by any means to vote early, by absentee, by mail, telling them it's okay. You can vote by mail now, completely changing his position on this. Clearly, that has not worked. Telling his supporters to vote any way that is easiest for you, to make sure to vote no matter what, whichever way is easiest. That has not worked, probably because of how he has plagued the whole system of mail-in balloting. When it comes to the Republican Party, they completely view it in a negative way. And I even posted this. Let me pull this up. Of course, this is just whatever. This is not scientific. This is not numerical. This is just a random Twitter post. This guy could be lying for all we know, or joking or whatever. But I posted this because I genuinely do think that this is a situation for a lot of voters. This random guy on Twitter says, my dad just told me he's not going to bother voting for Trump because Kamala is going to steal the election anyway. Now, this is a more broad topic, expanding on the early vote situation that Trump has been against. But still, you get the idea. Donald Trump has, his comments about how the 2020 election was stolen, how mail-in votes, how absentee votes were completely fraudulent, and how that produced all of the fraud that has plagued him. Not only because of making it harder, right, for his supporters to vote. People who can't vote in person, a lot of them won't even bother voting by mail, registering to vote by mail, because they believe it's fraud. Right, as this person outlines, or they just won't vote at all in person or by mail, because they believe Kamala Harris will steal the election. That is a serious problem that was hurting the Trump campaign in 2020, and it proved to hurt the Trump campaign in 2020. He lost the election, lost 6 of the 7 core battleground states, and it continues to be a problem for the campaign. His way of coping with his 2020 election loss might have felt good to him right then and there, or at least made it easier for him to cope with his loss, but now it is having consequences. It is only making Donald Trump's voters, making it more difficult to vote for them, and it's clearly playing out because it's clearly plaguing his campaign, because now the margin that Democrats are voting by early than Republicans is by 300%. That is more than the margin was in 2020. Of course, not by a raw vote, because both Democrats and Republicans voted by so much more early. When it comes to the early voting, they cast so many more early and mail in votes in 2020, obviously because of COVID, but just the fact that the margin has actually increased for Democrats in 2024, in Pennsylvania, of course. I don't know if it's increased in these other states, but Pennsylvania is, of course, the most important state, 19 electoral votes. That matters so much, because it just demonstrates how big of a problem this early vote problem is for the Trump campaign. When you look at the 2020 margins, it was razor thin in so many states. You had Wisconsin going to Biden by, I don't know what the raw vote here was. We can actually look at it. I know in the other two really close states, but Wisconsin was a 0.6% margin. Joe Biden won it. Whoops! Oh my God, got to do a bunch to get to it. But he won the state of Wisconsin by, look at that, 20,000 votes. That's insane. Less, or no, 20,700 votes. That is so narrow compared to the 3.2 million votes that were cast. Biden only won it by 20,000. You had Arizona. He won Arizona by 11,000 votes, razor thin. In Georgia, he won by it was 16,000, I believe, votes. These margins, even in 2020, when Biden was expected to win by a lot, win Florida, win North Carolina, Ohio, Iowa, etc., possibly. Um, Even then, the vote was so razor thin. And in 2024, a lot of these states are expected to get even closer. Take Pennsylvania, for example. At least it wasn't as close as the point two margin in Georgia, right? Pennsylvania voted for Biden by 1.2, somewhat of an actual substantial margin. Um, a lot of these states now in 2024 are expected to narrow up, right? Kamala Harris is slightly underperforming Joe Biden in the polling as of right now, compared to the actual results from 2020. So if Pennsylvania is now narrowing up by a point, just a point, that's already Harris with a 0.2% margin. Trump could make the smallest gains in these states, but the early voting situation could demolish all of it. It could mean nothing. This could amount to half a point, say, or even less, 0.3%. But that could literally change the outcome in some of these states. 0.3% would have, let's call it 0.32, would have changed the outcome in Arizona, would have changed the outcome in Georgia, would have made Wisconsin razor thin, would have put Pennsylvania into the tilt margin characterization. The point is, the smallest actions and strategies of the Trump campaign, especially something as negative as these results so far, that can have massive impacts as you go from battleground state to battleground state. Take North Carolina, for example. Sorry, my forecast has to reload here. But take North Carolina, for example. I have the margin right now. Whoops. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not updated. I actually have North Carolina going. Don't look at this. I actually have it going to Donald Trump by about 0.5%. Just half a percentage point. So razor thin. As you can see, it is a tilt state. If even 1% of Trump's voters don't get out, or even half a point of Trump's voters don't end up voting because, they, whatever, they don't really want to go in, come the actual election day, and they hadn't voted early, beforehand by absentee or by mail or actual physical early voting, because Donald Trump, propped up these concerns about the legitimacy of early voting. That could very well make the difference in a state like North Carolina. Kamala Harris could then win North Carolina, and then she has a lot of room. Then she could even lose Pennsylvania, and she still wins the election. So, point is, American elections, at least in this day and age, are so partisan where only a handful of states really matter, and they are just about toss-ups, 50-50 right now, in something as minor as this. And the big thing is also, this isn't picked up in polling, right? Nothing like this. If you're a Trump supporter, you would answer, yeah, I'm voting for Trump in the polls, and then come, election day, whatever. You didn't, you were planning on voting early, you never got to it, you don't feel like then voting actually on election day, you miss out on it. These supporters would answer in polls, and this isn't at all picked up in polling. So it's a very, very interesting situation. Awful news for the Trump campaign. Great news for the Harris campaign. So thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe down below for more content like this, more political content. We are only 21 days away from the election, so definitely make sure to subscribe. Drop a comment to let me hear your thoughts on this topic, and I will see you all next time.